that shift in education. I'm hearing more of it. It's not just about, how to code or about advanced manufacturing skills. It's about the human elements that surround all of that stuff. You're going to need both to succeed. I think that's the key message that I'm hearing and that I'm feeling in the community right now.
No, I totally agree. As you lifted up, like the importance of those durable skills, we keep hearing that the importance of communication, collaboration, teamwork, metacognition, mindfulness, like understanding all of those things.
You are listening to the Global CTE podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Global CTE podcast. I am your host, Sylvester Chisom. This is the place where we like to wrap a blanket of goodwill around the career tech education community and interview the best, the brightest, the movers, the shakers, the innovators who are really preparing our students for success in the global marketplace. Today is no different. I have my good friend, Dan Gonzalez, the CEO and co-founder of District C. Now, let me tell you about Dan. Dan studied engineering at Dartmouth College before becoming a high school physics teacher. After teaching, Dan joined Manhattan Prep, a global leader in test preparation. He became president of the company in 2011, shortly after it was acquired by Kappa. More recently, Dan co-founded District C, a nonprofit that prepares the next generation of diverse talent for modern work. District C's flagship program, called Teamship, is a reimagined internship experience where teams of students solve real problems for real businesses. Since 2017, over 4,000 Teamship students have worked on real problems for almost 400 businesses. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sylvester. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Listen, man, I'm excited to have you. I did my homework, my research on all the things you guys are doing at District C. And I love the fact that you're moving the needle forward as it relates to creating real world learning experiences for students. So I think that's a big plus for our listeners here. So before we dive too deep, how'd you get here, man? What's the origin story?
Yeah, good question. So I think working in the professional world, I realized what a unique thing it was to work with people when they were excellent at working with others to solve hard problems, right? When they had those kind of intangible skills and mindsets that allowed them to tackle novel problems and communicate with others and leverage the diverse perspectives of others. Those people seemed like those are the people everyone wants to work with, right? And I realized that if you think back to your schooling and the things that you learn and the things that you're taught in school, you don't have any time. There's very little time to develop those sorts of kind of skills and competencies, right? School is basically designed to help you acquire and then recall information for an exam. It's designed to help you follow predetermined procedures like a 10-step chemistry lab. School is designed to help you read in order to follow someone else's instructions. There's very little time spent working with others who bring diverse perspectives to tackle new, complex, novel problems that haven't been solved before. Generally there's an answer in the back of the book, and there's a predetermined path that's given you to get to that answer. And so kind of recognizing this gap between the kinds of skills that employers demand and the kinds of learning that our traditional school system promotes, there's a big mismatch there. And so we wanted to develop Teamship, which, as you said, is our flagship program, as the context in which groups of students could explore new, challenging problems, real world problems, and practice their team-based problem-solving skills in a safe and supportive environment. So that was kind of the origin story for District C and Teamship.
Yeah, that's impressive. I like to ask that question because I really feel like our work builds on it, on each level, like leads you to the next thing. And now you're here with this flagship product, Teamship. So for someone who may not understand, like, how do you define Teamship and why is it important? I think that's something kind of critical there.
Yeah. So Teamship is an experience where teams of students, generally 3 or 4 students, are working together to solve a real problem for a real business in the community. And during a Teamship cycle, those students are getting support and coaching from a trained and certified educator. So essentially, Teamship happens over anywhere between 20 and 40 hours of contact time that can be delivered over the course of one intensive week in the summer or over maybe 4 to 5 weeks during the school year. But Teamship is predominantly designed to be delivered in school during the school day so that all students have access to it. I think you and I both know, and I imagine your listeners know, that students that have social capital and family connections tend to be the students that get the most meaningful and robust work-based learning opportunities, and they tend to happen outside of school. What about all the other students that deserve those opportunities? And maybe those students are taking care of grandparents outside of school or taking care of siblings, don't have access to the kinds of opportunities that other students do. We really set out to build a program that could be implemented during school, during the school day, to provide equity and access for all students. So essentially, we're bringing the business partners to the school day experience. And a teacher could implement Teamship as a capstone inside of an existing course. They could create a full standalone course for Teamship. Lots of different ways to implement, but the goal is equity and access and a rigorous experience where students are working together to do real work for real businesses.
I love the fact that you mentioned the equity piece, because that was going to be my next question. I'm like, you're so right that a lot of that happens outside of the school for those who do have that access or those family relationships, but that's not every student that's in the classroom. And I love that you're bringing that equity, that your program helps to provide the equity. Can you give us a highlight of one of your schools where you've seen Teamship being implemented at the highest level, where you had some fun outcomes, some transformation with some students? I know you have probably a list of schools, but I would love to hear like one of those stories.
Yeah. So we have a number of different kinds of schools and school environments in which Teamship is implemented. I'll give you one of my favorite examples. There's a school in Wake County here in North Carolina called Heritage High School. And we've got a great teacher there named Mackie Heyman. He went through our coaching institute in 2019. He's an entrepreneurship teacher, and he spent 40 hours getting trained and certified to be a District C coach. And so we support his implementation of Teamship as a semester-long course in his school. And so what he does is he's got 2 sections of entrepreneurship, Entrepreneurship 1 and Entrepreneurship 2. He's a CTE teacher. He recruits students out of Entrepreneurship 2 for this semester-long standalone Teamship course, during which teams of students solve problems for real businesses over the course of a semester. And they get 3 opportunities over the course of the semester, 3 different teams. Cycle 1, you're with one grouping of students, then you switch teams for cycle 2 and cycle 3. And each time you get a new business and a new problem to solve for. So Mackie is leading the charge at Heritage High School. He's been doing this now for 3 or 4 years. And he's developed a program around it. And students are opting to do this because they know that this is preparing them for their futures. They're engaged by the opportunity to express their voice towards creating a solution for real problems that are happening in the community. So that's one of many positive examples. I could go on and on. I'll pause there. But Mackey's doing awesome work at Heritage High School.
Okay, salute to Mackey and the students at Heritage High School there. That sounds incredible. And I love the fact that they're getting to work on real problems from real businesses and getting those interactions with real entrepreneurs throughout that scenario. Any problems you can lift up that they've worked on or that you're familiar with, or if it's not that school, an example of a problem, that some kids have worked on?
Yeah, good question. So we have here in the area a museum of history, and we partnered one of our schools with this museum. And down in the basement, they have this workshop, and in the workshop, the exhibit creators build the exhibits, right? And so you can imagine this space with a bunch of tools, materials, shelves, and everything you can imagine. And they were having some trouble with what they thought was kind of an inventory issue. So, if I needed a drill to go build this structure, I'd go over to the shelf where the drills are supposed to be, and there's no drill. Like, where's the drill? Who checked out the drill? And so the problem that they posed to the students was, hey, look, we're having some trouble with our inventory system and our materials. Could you help us figure this out? And so the students came in and actually visited the site, visited the workshop, interviewed some of the employees, chatted with them, watched them work, and realized that the issue wasn't that there wasn't an inventory system. The issue was that there was a lack of trust between the employees. Mm-hmm. In other words, if I know that I'm going to need that drill next week, I am going to grab that drill off the shelf and stick it in my drawer because I don't trust that it's going to be there when I need it. And so they uncovered kind of this deeper issue, and ended up providing a bunch of solutions to address that issue that really helped the workers kind of establish a plan and kind of overcome some of these like inter-team member trust issues that they were having. I will say, just to like abstract that out a little bit, the problems tend to be in one of three areas: process or operations problems. And this one that I just described would kind of fit into that category. Growth or marketing problems. And then kind of human capital or team culture sorts of things. The problems tend to be accessible to students, so they're not overly technical. They don't require a ton of domain expertise. We tend to try to keep them in kind of areas or topics that are accessible for high school students, so that they're practicing their team-based problem-solving skills in areas that they're familiar with without getting bogged down by kind of a heavy technical load, so to speak.
I like that. I want to come back to the problems and like the types of problems, but I wanted to ask you about this conversation. As I was doing my research, I came across Carl Ryden from Precision Lender, and you two had a conversation about education and talent development. Can you share a little insight on what you guys talked about there?
Yeah, Carl is an entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur in the fintech space. He's the founder of Precision Lender here in the Triangle down in North Carolina. And he's also an education philanthropist. So he has supported lots of different education initiatives. And I got the chance to talk with him for 30 minutes or so. about his viewpoint and like why he's interested in supporting, giving his money to education efforts. And from his perspective, kind of the quote that kind of just knocked my socks off, stopped me dead in my tracks. He said, we need to spend less time preparing students to be bad computers and more time preparing them to be great humans. If you think about that, it's a pretty direct, it's pretty direct statement. But if you think about it, it feels spot on. So this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Our education systems are designed to prepare students to execute on like computational things that modern technology and modern computers are much better at than human beings, right? And so rather than spend our time teaching them how to be inferior computers, why don't we lean into the things that make us uniquely human and elevate those things and build those strengths? And so those are things like empathy, teamwork, learning how to leverage diverse perspectives, learning how to pull the best out of your teammates, understanding how to break down complexity into its simpler components, knowing how to communicate effectively, how to influence, how to manage your time, manage your energy, manage your attitude and your choices, how to bring a positive spirit to your work. All of these things that make us uniquely human in an age where technological advances are accelerating, and in an age where artificial intelligence, computers, robots are increasingly taking the procedural rote tasks and assignments that used to be a part of work, a human's job. More and more, what employers are expecting is that you're bringing those uniquely human skills to your job. The robots and the computers are doing the rest of the stuff. What is going to add value to an employer, to a community, is the ability to work together with others to do really hard new things. That's what it means to be a great human in this modern economy. And I think that's what Carl meant. And I just took about 3 minutes to put that into words. He got it in one succinct sentence, which I so appreciated. And I carry that quote around because it's central to the work that we're doing at District C.
Yeah, I think it's so profound. That's why I wanted to give you the space to lift that up, because it's like, if we really want our kids to be successful in this modern world and the way things are moving going forward, that critical thinking and empathy and being able to work with people with diverse perspectives is so important. Talk to me about some strategies on how do you implement or teach that, working with teams with diverse perspectives? Like, I know that's something not just for the students, but I know like some of our administrators probably could use some support on that. What are your thoughts on that, Dan?
It's a really good question. And we've thought long and hard about this. And I think one of the keys is downgrading from abstractions to concrete behaviors. So if I were to tell a group of students, hey, be more collective, be more collaborative in your work, I think at a high level, they understand what that means. But what am I supposed to actually do to be more collective, be more collaborative? And so what we kind of learned early on as we were trying out this Teamship model with actual high school students was that the abstractions are great to kind of set a North Star, but they're not great for helping students actually get better at moving towards that North Star. So what does help them are concrete tools, behaviors, and ways of working. So I'll give you an example of 3 tools that we coach students on that they learn how to puzzle piece together to leverage, to hear, understand, and leverage the diverse perspectives of a team of 3 or 4. So let's say there's 4 of us on a team. We've all researched something related to a problem that we're trying to solve. We've all done that on our own. And we're about to come back together and talk about it. You know this from your professional experience, Sylvester. If you were to be in a team with 3 other adults doing this, it will probably happen in a way that typically happens, which is one person has a pretty dominant voice. That person tends to do a lot of talking, not a whole lot of listening. The 3 other people will quickly get bored of that person talking. They might start checking their email. They might zone out, or they might just be thinking about, when is my turn to talk? When am I going to get to say what I think? And it becomes kind of this battle for time and space, right? And we're not really listening to each other. We're just like playing roles on this team. So how can we help students to break down that dynamic? So the first is having time and space to think on your own before you think and share as a group. So we call this solo flight. And so imagine the 4 of us coming together and we say, okay, we're going to start with a 5-minute solo flight. And each of us is going to identify the 2 things that are most important from the research that we just did that we want to make sure the whole group hears. So take 5 minutes solo time and identify those 2 things. So it gives the introverts in the group the time and the space that they need to collect their thoughts, organize their thinking, and get ready to present, right? Extroverts tend to kind of do their processing out loud. Introverts need the time and space, like I do, to prepare, right? So start with that solo flight tool. Second, we're going to do what we call a take 5, which is that each person on the team is going to get a dedicated 5 minutes to share their 2 thoughts. And the rest of the team is going to ask them questions about those 2 thoughts. And so we're investing fully in that person for a full 5 minutes. No switching to someone else's agenda, no crosstalk. It is all questions directed towards that person to fully investigate their thinking and their ideas. And once 5 minutes are up, we're going to switch to the next person. So it's a combination of solo flight tool, take 5 tool, and a questioning tool. When you come out of that 20 or 30 minutes, what you have is a collective understanding. So the individual perspectives have been transformed into a collective intelligence that you didn't have 30 minutes prior. And that comes from really intentional process and procedure and investing in others. And sometimes it just takes some very simple structures to do that, but you put those simple structures in place and it can totally change the way that a team works and operates.
That's so good and so comprehensive. And I'm just thinking of the teams over the years I have participated in meetings and how they have gone the opposite of what you just said. And to think the value of like, wow, how the level of mastery that these students will have as they move into their careers in understanding team dynamics and how to move ideas and missions and things forward. With the process, with a wonderful process here. I want to, I'm gonna go off on a slight tangent because I think I want your feedback on this and I'm curious your thoughts. Lex Fridman and Jeff Bezos just did a podcast. So Lex Fridman just had Jeff Bezos on his podcast and I'm listening to it and Jeff was talking about being a leader and a lot of what you're saying sounds similar to some things I've heard how they operate at Amazon in some of their meetings. Jeff said he likes to go last in terms of talking. So in the meeting, like you just broke down, and he said he felt like in his early days, he has all these ideas. He goes first. Then his conversation influences what everyone else was thinking, or maybe they won't say what they were originally thinking because, well, Jeff is the most senior person in the room. He said what he said, then maybe we should just do that. So he said as a practice, he made it where he would go last and then he broke that down like foundationally. And he also said in a perfect world, he felt like the least senior person in the meeting, like when you do have those dynamics, like assistant manager, like executive kind of thing in the meeting, he said he felt like the least senior person should share their ideas first on up to the most senior person speaking last, so that everyone's voice of all the stakeholders could be heard. I was curious when I heard that. I was like, I couldn't wait to talk to you about this Teamship to see your thoughts. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's interesting when you introduce like hierarchical status into a group dynamic, right? And what I would say about our Teamship model is that there's no hierarchy in the team. So you'll have 3 or 4 members of the team, and they're all peers. They're coming with different experiences and backgrounds and perspectives and wildly different strengths and weaknesses, but they're all peers. And I think what I would say is, in a lot of meeting settings, you do have hierarchies. The question I would ask is, how do you break down the hierarchies in a way where everyone feels that their voice and their contribution is equally valid, right? Mm-hmm. And I think if you have any kind of preset order or structure, like, oh, the boss is going to go last, and the boss always goes last, then it doesn't feel like, to me anyway, it doesn't feel like the voices are equal. It's like whether the boss goes first or last, he's still the boss. And and so how do you have a team meeting where, or conversations and structures where everyone feels equally validated and has equal voice? And I think some of these protocols and ways of working would help that. So, maybe the first time you do it, there's just one order. And the second time you do it, there's a different order. And, the boss is maybe going first or last or in the middle. But the more you do it, the hope would be, it feels like we're all coming to this as equals. And I think for students, the most important thing that I would hope that they would take from an experience like that is everyone has an important perspective. Everyone is bringing a unique perspective. And my job is not just to share mine. It's also to pull the best out of my teammates. And so I'm going to come committed and prepared to ask my best questions to get your best ideas, Sylvester, because I know that your stuff is going to be different from what's in my head. And if we're going to succeed together, we need all of it on the table. And, I don't know how Jeff thinks about that. I imagine part of why he's creating the structures he does is because he wants to hear from everyone. But I would take it even one step further and say, mix it up, mix your order up.
I like what you just said, to add to what he said, like maybe don't keep it that way to show that like, hey, we can change this thing up. But he was saying that like in his early days, he found like, well, if I spoke too soon, then his voice in the room no one would really offer their honest input because it could contradict what he was saying. So I think that was his intent. But I like what you said over time, maybe switching that up. Let's talk about industry partners. So I've had many people on the podcast that they're working their community as a CTE director or as an admin or even as a teacher to try to create these industry connections and real experiences for the students. But I like that your model, you help to take that heavy lift off of the educators and you source the industry partners and the problems. Can you talk a little more about that process? Yeah.
So I think what we learned early on is that this is a huge pain point for educators. They want to be engaging industry. They want to be engaging companies and businesses, but it takes a lot of time to develop the network, nurture the network, make the right matches, et cetera. And of course, school districts and schools have business advisory councils and business networks that they lean on, especially inside of CTE departments. But even in those cases, we have found, to get the volume of businesses engaged that you need to make an impact, it's a lot. And so part of what we do through our Teamship support for our school and district partners is we take on all of the business partner management. That means sourcing the businesses, screening them, onboarding them, scoping the Teamship problem with them, managing the calendar so that they know when to show up and where, making sure that they're prepared for those meetings with students, and then all the follow-up that happens afterwards. So we take all of that on. And the reason is we want the coach, the teacher/coach, to be able to focus on the work that they do best, which is coaching students. And so teaching, I know this from having been a teacher, it is the hardest job on the planet. There are more calls on your time than in any other job. The environment in which the work happens is dynamic and ever changing. So if you think that on Friday at 2 p.m. X is going to happen, usually there's some announcement or something that comes up in the school where X gets changed to Y. And so you're constantly adapting, evolving, and having to respond to dynamic conditions on the ground, which makes it really hard to be out in the community engaging businesses. And so what we do is we take ideas from our school district partners and from our schools, and we take introductions from them. And they may say, we've got 3 businesses we've been trying to engage in this region. We've not been able to get them across the finish line. Can we introduce them to District C, and can you help us onboard them for Teamship purposes? And so we'll then set up the first meeting and get them involved. Other times we're connecting school districts with our network of over 400 businesses that we've developed. But this is, I think, has allowed us to move the work forward more quickly and with less friction. We've developed a team of people. We have a team of people that are focused exclusively on this at District C, and we've been able to refine and optimize the work so that we can do it with more efficiency for more partners. And again, that allows the teachers to really focus on their coaching work and their work with students.
That's so good, because the problems that I hear talking to teachers, they know they need to have these real world experiential learning opportunities, especially in the CTE space. And some just, they don't know where to start, or like you said, they're overworked with other things that are also critical. So having a partner like you to manage that process, then it can be done in excellence, right? I think that's important. And speaking of partnerships, I would be remiss to not mention our mutual friend, Brooke Rice, VP of Work-Based Learning at NAF. She spoke so highly of you and District C. I'm like, I said, can you make an introduction? I have to talk to them, because this is incredible, the work they're doing. Talk to me about the partnership you have with NAF and District C.
Oh my gosh. I think so highly of Brooke and her team and the work that NAF does at the scale that they do it at, right? I mean, they are impacting thousands and thousands of students every year with a really clear focus on work-based learning. And how do you get meaningful work-based learning opportunities to as many students as possible across the country? And of course, this is what Brooke and her team think about and work on every single day. They have a whole work-based learning continuum that they promote and that they support their NAF academies in implementing. We chatted a couple of years ago about how Teamship could potentially support their work-based learning continuum. So again, Teamship is designed to be delivered during school in the classroom. And this is a great way for NAF teachers in NAF academies to get real world work-based learning opportunities to more students in a way that satisfies the internship requirements that are part of kind of the NAF track certification in NAF academies. So we had kind of a good conversation a few years ago. NAF was generous enough to fund 3 teachers from across the country to get trained and certified with us. We've been supporting them over the last 2 years and implementing Teamship as part of their NAF work. That led to a great kind of expanded partnership with Milwaukee Public Schools and the CTE team there, which has been really exciting and really fun. But the goal, in short, is to use District C's Teamship model as what they call a mentored industry project as part of students' NAF experience. And so, again, these hours count towards internship hours and can get plugged right into the work-based learning continuum that NAF has been so thoughtful in creating. And so, yeah, it feels like we're just at the beginning, looking forward to more work with NAF and Brooke's team in the years to come here.
Yeah, I totally see it. It's a lot of great synergy there on both sides. So, yeah, I definitely had to mention that because I was like, hold on. She said your name and the work you all were doing together. I was like, hold on, slow down. Say that again. I said, I need to write this down.
Yeah. And it goes back. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, keep going.
I was going to say, it goes back to that kind of equity and access pillar that we talked about earlier. NAF is equally invested in that. And they see, work-based learning in the class during the school day as a really important and critical way to get these kinds of experiences to more students. So we're very mission aligned in that way. And we have learned a ton from them and the work that they do. Hopefully someday our impact will be as great and widespread as theirs. They've done tremendous work.
Outstanding. So I have two final questions. So the first one I want to ask, problem selection. For your industry partners, like what makes a great problem to share with students?
Oh man, we are still working on figuring this out. But over the last 7 years, I think we've learned a lot, and there are a couple of key elements that make a good problem. The first, and this is the most important, is that it is a problem, not a project. So oftentimes a company will come to us and say, yeah, I want to do this. I would like your students to research my 5 biggest competitors and create a report no longer than 10 pages that they can submit to me at the end of this experience. That's a project. And the way that I would define a project is the scope of work has already been defined. The solution has already been defined. It's like, okay, I've got these competitors, they're taking my market share. Solution, I need to research and understand more about them. Here's the scope of work. What we want is students to be exploring ill-defined problems and coming up with root causes to those problems, and then determining their own work product based on the solution that they think is going to be best suited for that problem. So a problem is open-ended, a project is closed-ended. So that's number one, problem, not project. And typically what we do is we coach businesses. We will ask them questions like, what is keeping you up at night? And usually they'll say something that they haven't figured out how to deal with yet, right? That is an unsolved problem. The second thing is we want to keep it really open. So we rarely define the problem for students in more than 4 to 6 sentences. And typically only 1 or 2 of those sentences actually states what the problem is. So the first couple of sentences might be a little background information on the company. And then the last couple of sentences might be a very short description of the challenge that they're facing. And the reason is we want to give time and space for the students to explore the details of the problem and the root causes of that problem. So when they have that launch interview with the business, they feel like they can go in a lot of different directions. So it's opening up the scope rather than closing it down. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing I would say is it has to be accessible. So if it's highly technical or requires, graduate level expertise of a particular technical domain, that takes students out of the game, right? You need it to be something that they can understand, wrestle with, and have relatively easy access to. So, an operational issue at a cafe, for example. Say they've got overcrowding at the cash register because their space design is really poor. Students have gone into stores, they've gone into cafes, they understand what that looks and feels like. And so they can focus on optimizing team performance, understanding the problem and solving that problem, rather than, wait, what are all these technical words? What's all this jargon? I'm not getting that. And so we try to make it as accessible as possible. So those are kind of three key elements of problem definition.
Yeah, that's very well defined. Thank you for sharing that, Dan. And I think that definitely helps to, when you give students problems like that. I like what you said, a problem, not a project. It's open-ended. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Final question. I ask all my guests this, and I'm super interested to hear your response through the lens of Teamship and District C. But what's your vision for the future of career tech education?
My vision for the future of career and technical education is a vision that includes way more human skills as weighted against technical skills. And I think we're already starting to see this shift. I just talked with a higher ed institution this morning, two professors in the business school at this institution who are exploring ways to get their college students more internship-like work-based learning. And I asked the question, like, in these experiences as you imagine them, do you prefer that students are focused on the technical elements of finance and accounting or marketing, or on durable skills and the human skills needed to interact as a professional in the workplace? They said both, but more emphasis on the latter. This is coming from professors at a higher ed institution who are saying the employer community is telling us not that students don't have the technical skills, we can teach them that stuff, but that they don't have the human skills, and they're struggling to find a place for them when they're not coming prepared with those human skills. And I think as we think about work across every industry, across every sector, whether it's high tech or not, employers are sounding this alarm and they're saying, look, we can teach them the technical stuff. We need them to come prepared with the human skills. And that's what is most lacking. And so I think we're seeing that shift in education. I'm hearing more of it. It's not just about, how to code or about advanced manufacturing skilles. It's about the human elements that surround all of that stuff. You're going to need both to succeed. I think that's the key message that I'm hearing and that I'm feeling in the community right now. I don't know if you agree.
No, I totally agree. As you lifted up, like the importance of those durable skills, we keep hearing that the importance of communication, collaboration, teamwork, metacognition, mindfulness, like understanding all of those things. The employers are looking for people who come with some foundational knowledge or mastery in those spaces. And those things are definitely important. And I appreciate the work that you're doing with District C, especially centered around like that teamwork and collaboration component. You're really equipping the students for success with that. With that said, Dan, how can we get in contact with you if someone wants to work with you, District C, bring you in for a keynote, bring in the District C to their district? How should they get in touch?
Yeah, the website is districtc.co, districtc.co. There's no M at the end of that. It's .co. And there's a page, there's a contact page. You can reach us there. You'll get someone reaching back out to you within 24 hours. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to work with you towards achieving this broader mission of preparing young people for modern work. And Sylvester, just along those lines, just so appreciate what you are doing. There are so many podcasts out there. It is hard to get traction. It's hard to build an audience. starting a podcast is a daunting thought, and you have done it, stuck with it, and built your audience. And just grateful that there are people like you lifting up work that's happening in the community to support this broader mission and vision that we've been talking about. So grateful for you. Thanks for it. Keep it up.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. I very much appreciate that. It is a big lift sometimes, but it's exciting and energizing when I get a chance to connect with outstanding individuals who are leading the charge forward like yourself. If you enjoyed this episode, connect with Dan. Don't be selfish. Share this episode with a friend or a colleague. A lot of great gems were shared here today. And until the next episode, remember, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.